The scent of roasted turkey drifted through my kitchen, blending with the faint sweetness of cinnamon pie cooling on the counter. I wiped my hands on a linen towel, smoothing the silk sleeve of my blouse, as if anyone here would notice. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the oven and the clink of glasses as I set them gently on the oak table. A table that, this year, I had built for myself. It was Thanksgiving morning, and for the first time, I wasn't driving across town to my parents' house. No frantic rush, no balancing pies on the passenger seat, no rehearsing polite smiles for conversations that left me feeling small. Instead, I stood in the glow of my own home, preparing a feast for people who had chosen me as family. My phone buzzed against the counter, screen lighting up with a message from my mother. The words were simple, almost cruel in their neatness. "We're keeping Thanksgiving just us this year. We need space." Her voice echoed in my memory, the same words spoken years ago, when their rejection had gutted me. But this time I didn't crumble. I glanced at the golden crust of the pie, the flicker of candles on the table, and felt something unexpected. Peace. Because I finally understood. I could celebrate without them. I still remember the first time those words, "We need space," fell from my mother's lips. It was the night before Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I was 24, standing in the cramped kitchen of my one-bedroom apartment in Chicago. I'd been stirring cranberry sauce from a recipe I'd found in my grandmother's old cookbook, the pages yellowed and stained with decades of tradition. The phone was wedged between my shoulder and ear when my mother sighed, heavy and deliberate. "Emily," she said, her voice clipped. "Your father, and I think it's best if you don't come this year. We just need space." I froze, wooden spoon midair, sauce dripping red into the pot, like a wound I hadn't felt yet. "Space? From me." My voice cracked, shame flooding my cheeks even though no one could see me. "You've been difficult lately," she continued. "Questioning everything, making choices we don't agree with. We can't have that energy at the table." Her words stung sharper than I could have imagined. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. "So, I'm not welcome," I whispered, though I already knew the answer. There was a pause, then the final cut. "Not this year." When the line went dead, the silence in my apartment screamed louder than any fight we'd ever had. I sank to the floor, knees pulled to my chest, cranberry sauce burning on the stove while tears blurred my vision. For years, Thanksgiving had been the anchor in our fractured family. One night of pretending, of holding hands and saying grace, of feeling like I belonged. And just like that, they'd taken even that from me. I cried until the edges of my grandmother's cookbook went damp under my cheek. She'd passed when I was 16, but her voice came back to me that night in memory. "If they don't make room for you at their table, Emily, you build your own." The words weren't loud, but they were steady, stronger than my mother's dismissal. I closed the cookbook, wiping my tears across the worn leather cover, and made a promise to myself. I wouldn't beg for a chair at a table that no longer wanted me. I would build my own. The first Thanksgiving alone was brutal. I ate takeout noodles from a flimsy carton while reruns of Friends played in the background, their canned laughter filling the silence. My grandmother's cookbook sat unopened on the counter, as if it were mocking me. But somewhere between slurping noodles and scrolling aimlessly through job boards, I felt a spark. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was the echo of her words. Build your own table. I started small. I baked pies in that tiny apartment oven, selling them to neighbors and coworkers around the holidays. My kitchen became a battlefield, flour dusting the floor like snow, my hands raw from kneading dough until midnight, the smoke alarm shrieking more times than I care to admit. I wasn't perfect, but every pie I handed over felt like a little rebellion, a piece of proof that I could create something worth sharing. The money wasn't much, but it paid a bill here, bought groceries there. And then came Mrs. Thompson, my building's retired tenant who always smelled faintly of lavender. She ordered 1 pie for her bridge club, then came back the next week for 3. One night, she leaned across my counter, eyes bright. "Emily, you've got something here. Don't hide it." Her belief lit a fire in me. I enrolled in late-night classes at a local culinary school, trading weekend outings for hours over stainless steel counters and sharp knives. I was exhausted, constantly smelling of butter and coffee, my fingers nicked from careless cuts. But I felt alive in a way I never had before. There were nights I doubted myself, nights I cried over collapsed cakes or burnt crusts, questioning if my parents had been right all along, that I wasn't enough, that I was just difficult, stubborn, foolish. But then I'd remember my grandmother's cookbook, her steady handwriting in the margins. Patience. The dough will rise. And it did. A cafe owner in Lincoln Park tried one of my pecan pies at a neighborhood fair. 2 weeks later, he called with an order, 20 pies for the holidays. I almost dropped the phone, heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. I stayed up 3 nights straight filling that order, sleeping in snatches between oven timers, but when I delivered those pies stacked neatly in brown boxes, something shifted. That was my first real win. And it snowballed. Word spread. Small catering gigs came in. Then a business partner, Sarah, a chef 10 years older who had clawed her way through the same doubts, took me under her wing. She didn't coddle me. She pushed me. She taught me how to negotiate contracts, how to price my work without apology, how to own the title of entrepreneur even when it felt like a costume. By the time my 27th birthday rolled around, I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was saving, investing, dreaming. I stopped posting about my work online, keeping my success quiet. My parents saw only filtered snapshots, me smiling at coffee shops, captions vague enough to hide the truth. Because part of me wasn't ready to show them. Part of me wanted the reveal to be its own kind of feast. By the time the 4th Thanksgiving since that phone call arrived, my life looked nothing like the girl who once wept over cranberry sauce in a dark apartment. This year, I was the host. The house I bought on the north side of Chicago wasn't extravagant by celebrity standards, but to me, it was a palace. White brick exterior with navy shutters, a wide front porch lined with pumpkins and lanterns, and inside, a kitchen twice the size of my first apartment. A place I had earned, brick by brick, pie by pie. The table was set with care, ivory linens, gold-rimmed plates, crystal glasses that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. My grandmother's cookbook rested quietly on the buffet, her handwriting marking the page for pumpkin pie, as if she, too, had a seat at this table. Around me, laughter filled the air, friends who had become family, mentors, even Sarah, who now called me her partner rather than her student. I was sliding the turkey onto its platter when the doorbell rang. I frowned. Everyone I had invited was already here. When I opened the door, there they stood. My parents. My father shifting awkwardly, my mother clutching her purse like it was armor. For a long, breathless moment, no one spoke. Emily, my mother said finally, her voice uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. We were in the neighborhood. Thought we'd stop by. In the neighborhood. On Thanksgiving. The irony nearly made me laugh. I stepped aside. Come in. Their eyes darted everywhere as they entered. First to the polished hardwood floors, then to the glow of candles, then to the dozen people gathered around my table. My mother's lips parted slightly, the way they always did when she was trying to calculate something she hadn't prepared for. Nice place, my father muttered, though his tone carried more surprise than praise. I let them absorb it all. The warmth, the abundance, the life I had built without them. Their silence was louder than any compliment. Finally, I spoke. Remember a few years ago? You told me not to come for Thanksgiving. That you needed space. My mother's eyes flickered. Emily, I held up a hand, calm but firm. You did me a favor. That night, I realized I didn't need to beg for a seat at your table. I could build my own. I gestured around the room. The laughter, the aromas, the home. This is my table. A murmur of agreement rippled from my guests. Sarah squeezed my shoulder from behind, grounding me. My father cleared his throat. We didn't know you were doing all this. Of course you didn't, I said softly. I didn't tell you. I wanted you to see it like this. To see me. The silence stretched, their faces painted with disbelief and something heavier, shame, maybe. My mother's eyes glistened, but whether from regret or pride, I couldn't yet tell. "You look happy," she whispered. "I am." For the first time in years, I wasn't performing for their approval. I wasn't small, or difficult, or too much. I was simply me, whole, independent, thriving. The turkey was cooling, the wine glasses filled, the candles flickering against faces that had chosen me. I looked back at my parents, standing stiff in the doorway of a home they never thought I could make. And for the first time in my life, I had the power to decide if they got a seat at my table. The dining room grew quiet after my words, the kind of hush that carried both discomfort and possibility. My guests exchanged glances, but stayed respectful, their conversations tapering off like a song coming to an end. All eyes shifted to me, and to the two people who had once held every ounce of power in my life. I gestured to the empty chairs at the far end of the table. "You're welcome to join us," I said, my tone calm but firm. "But understand something, this table has rules." My father frowned. "Rules?" "Yes," I said. "If you sit here, you don't get to belittle me for my choices anymore. You don't get to dismiss my career, my independence, my life. At this table, respect isn't optional." My mother's eyes darted nervously around the room, as if searching for an ally. But she found none. I leaned forward, steadying my voice. "You told me once that you needed space from me. Now I'm telling you, I need honesty from you. If you want to be here, you'll have to stop pretending silence is easier than love." Their faces stiffened, but I didn't let the pause swallow me. "Second," I continued, my voice softer now, "if you're at this table, you pursue your own dreams instead of tearing down mine. Dad, you've always wanted to write that book, but said it was too late. Mom, you've always spoken about opening your floral shop, but never dared. You taught me to fear failure, but sitting here means you're willing to try instead." A flicker crossed my father's eyes. Surprise, maybe even a spark of curiosity. "Finally," I said, placing my hands flat against the tablecloth. "Toxic patterns don't get served here. No guilt trips. No cold shoulders. If you're angry, say it. If you're proud, say it. If you don't agree, say it. But no more silent punishments." The room was still, the candle flames trembling slightly in the draft of my words. My parents looked at me, not as their child to correct or control, but as a woman setting boundaries they couldn't ignore. "This table is open," I finished, "but only if you're willing to grow with me. Otherwise, you can walk away. And I'll be fine either way." The shift was palpable. For the first time, they weren't in charge. The weight of choice hung heavy on their shoulders, not mine. I could see it dawning on them, the realization that I wasn't the one desperate for belonging anymore. I had built a place where I belonged, with or without them. Thanksgiving dinner moved forward in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. My parents hesitated at first, carefully navigating the boundaries I had set, but slowly, they began to engage, not as rulers of the household, but as people willing to meet me halfway. My father spoke briefly about the book he'd been drafting, and my mother shyly asked Sarah for advice on opening her floral shop. Small steps, yes, but enough to warm a corner of my heart I hadn't realized was still waiting. I caught myself smiling often, noticing the reflection of candlelight on the polished oak table, the steam rising from golden mashed potatoes, the laughter rippling across the room. These were the sights I had imagined all those lonely nights, the ones that had kept me going when I doubted everything. My grandmother's cookbook sat on the counter, pages slightly open to her pumpkin pie instructions, the ink smudged where I had pressed my tears into the margins. I realized she had been right. Building my own table didn't just feed the body, it nourished the soul. By the time dessert was served, something had shifted. My parents were no longer the ones who dictated my happiness. They were participants, guests in a space I had crafted with intention, resilience, and love. I caught my reflection in the window for a brief moment. The woman who had once sat crying over cranberry sauce was gone. In her place stood someone grounded, confident, and unapologetically herself. When the last slice of pie was taken and the candles flickered low, I whispered to myself what I had learned over the past years. Belonging isn't granted by others. It's claimed, built, and defended with patience and courage. The table didn't just belong to me. It belonged to everyone willing to show up with honesty and care. I glanced at my parents, who were quietly cleaning their plates, and allowed myself a small, knowing smile. For the first time, Thanksgiving didn't hurt. It was mine. Fully, completely, unapologetically mine. And that's when I realized I could celebrate without them and still be whole.